Now, next up on the agenda is the first panel talk of this day and conference. Now, without further ado, let's welcome the moderator, Martin Bruncko, EU Head of Binance, and his guests for our next panel on setting the stage for Europe as a global Web3 leader.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to be here in the heart of beautiful Paris. And it's fantastic to be here today with Yves and Ian. We're going to discuss about Europe and its potential and role in driving the Web3 revolution. And I think we have two fantastic speakers here. Yves, who co-founded Ubisoft almost 40 years ago, and I think impressively, it's just as iconic now, this company, as it was at the very beginnings. And then we have Ian, who is a Chief Experience Officer at Ledger, which again is one of the leading companies, obviously, in the crypto space. And I think Ian also has a very interesting background because previously he was doing a lot in arts, or in the art business, if I may say. He was the head of music at Apple, and he was also Chief Digital Officer at LVMH. So I look forward to a great discussion here.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, thanks so much.
So let's set the stage. We all know, and I don't need to explain to you, that's why you're here, that really Web3 is the future. We have right now about 300+ million users globally of crypto. And the question is, can Europe compete? Can it become a global leader? I think if we are really honest with ourselves, in the first internet wave, in the second internet wave, Europe always was an early leader, but then it lagged behind its two other sectors. So, however, I think if you look at what's happening right now in Europe, we are now growing more unicorns. I mean Europe, growing more unicorns than Asia or US. If you just look at the amount of VC funding, last year, it was more than 100 billion euros. That's 5 times more money than 5 years ago. So, Yves, Ian, do you think something is changing now?
Yeah, I think what's really changing is the fact that now there's enough money to be invested in Europe by lots of investors, and also the fact that now you don't need to go in the US or in other countries to create your company and to raise funds. And what's important is that there are lots of entrepreneurs in Europe, and they have lots of people that have been successful. So in being successful, they showed other people that they could actually take the risk. And the other point, which is also huge, is the talents in Europe are just immense. And they want to stay in their countries. And if they can take advantage of all those disruptions that are coming with Web3, I think they have the possibility to create the new world. And it's a new beginning for all of Europe and for all of you creating companies.
I think that's it. It's in many ways evolutionary, right? I mean, I'm an American living in Europe. But I did my genetic panel with 23andMe, and you know what it told me? I'm European, it turns out. So I think if you recontextualize Americans as the Europeans who took massive risk and left once upon a time, then it's a more kind of risk-centric culture. At the same time that the internet was this revolution of information that changed our lives. It changed humanity. We went from disconnection and very expensive telecom bills to call internationally to having 6.5 billion connected smartphones, and everybody is literally one WhatsApp or WeChat phone call away from everyone else on the planet. So now we can actually do what we want from anywhere that we want, and the lifestyle here is pretty great. So now that an entrepreneur like myself has the ability to have the lifestyle of Europe, but the entrepreneurialism of the US, who would say no to that?
So I think this has been one of the accusations against Europe, that, we're kind of slow, we just have too much of a good life here, we're not, entrepreneurial enough. I think, Yves, you have been demonstrating in your company for 40 years the opposite. So, but what was kind of the secret of your success here? Right? Why have you managed to keep building this company in Europe, given that there's been quite a lot of, I think, iconic companies started by Europeans, but then they usually would move elsewhere. And I think even if you look at the crypto world, I think that's quite interesting, right? Because I think there was a whole bunch of projects that were either started by Europeans, but abroad, or started by others in Europe. I mean, from Ethereum to many, many other companies. Tether, bunch of ex-Europeans as well. So why have you stayed, and how, what's the secret? Why, how maybe moving forward, this is going to change?
The secret was actually the fantastic schools that we have in Europe. They create every year a good bunch of fantastic talents that just want to create the new world. And if there's a company around them that can help them to succeed and grow in a new universe, they are happy to do so. So we recruited lots of very talented people in France, and we actually sent them all over the world to train the talents in different countries, and they really help create this new video game industry more as an industry at that time, because at the beginning it was, a lot of small developers doing games in their homes. But quickly it became an industry where you have studios, where you create, you have to find the best talents, and those talents are competing against other groups of talents all over the world. And that's what really was extremely interesting, is that you are going to fight against Japanese, against Americans, and at the end of the day, it's really rewarding when you win, because that it's like the Olympic Games. You won the Olympic Games with the game you created. So that's what made our teams very excited about staying where they wanted to be. And we opened offices in Annecy, in Montpellier, in many places in Europe also, where people wanted to stay.
Exactly. I think that that education and the education, the métier of engineering that comes from these schools here in France. I mean, good luck finding a crypto project without a French person on the team, right? And I think that's because, cryptography, security, I mean, these are things that have been studied very well, and really leaders in those métiers have been from France for a very long time. And the same for us, this is why Ledger has an outpost in Grenoble. There's an incredible school and program there for cryptography and security, and it's a great place to live. And to your point, if people can practice what it is they've learned around other incredibly intelligent people in a place that is beautiful and great to live, and full of hiking and mountain biking and all of these other things that are great for lifestyle, then again, why wouldn't you?
I was actually going to have it as the last question, like how would you sell Paris or Europe to crypto folks, many of whom are living now in Dubai, which is not a bad place to live, no taxes, but thank you. I think that was a very, very good sales pitch, so you just preempted my question.
I just wanted to say as well that we need schools to continue to invest in Europe. We need governments to really understand where this business is going and help those schools to progress in the right directions, because we see that more in North America, where there's a new business coming, schools are fast to react. We need this constant push now in Europe also to make sure that we actually train the talents so that they are adapted to this new world.
If you look at any successful civilization over history, you'll find at the start of it an investment in education, right? I mean, even look at the story of the US through the 20th century, and it was really people fleeing from Europe, from Hitler in World War II, that built a lot of the the university system in the U.S. and and ultimately the atomic bomb, right? That intellectual talent came from Europe, settled in the U.S. and created schools and educational opportunities for for millions of people. So education is always at the base of it.
I guess the question for me has always been, there's no doubt we had great schools here. There's no doubt that we were able to start great technologies in here. I mean, actually, if you look at mobile, right? Mobile started in Europe. If you go back, to late 90s, the mobile adoption was way higher in Europe than it was in the US. And I lived between both places, so it was just shocking to me coming back to US and just see these outdated mobile phones, very few people having them. But then US went and caught up, right? So all these clever people somehow left for US. So I think this is the big question to me. So with Web3, with things being much more decentralized, after COVID as well, people being used to not working from a single office, do you think that this is something that's changing the competitive position of Europe, or why will not it be? Why should it be different this time? Why won't these entrepreneurs leave, and why shouldn't they leave?
When I look at this, I see not a Europe centricity, but I see a kind of a change in a lack of Silicon Valley centricity, right? So I don't see kind of all these Web3 companies, necessarily now centered in Europe or centered in Paris or anything like that. What I see is people that are spread all over the place. I think what Balaji has written in the network state is sort of a more directionally correct picture of society in the future. I think we're, on some level, we're moving post-nation state and toward network state. And the networkstate.com, I didn't write the book. I don't even know Balaji, but I think that the thinking is very challenging and probably directionally correct. And so I think you're kind of moving from that sort of, from those geographic boundaries and to, groups of like-minded people who are gathered together on the network in some way around shared ideals. That's really, what we're doing. And then that leaves us a choice as humans to live where we would like to, for whatever reason we would like to.
Which brings up an interesting question of government. The first panel here with CZ, nobody less than CZ himself, was basically with the minister speaking about a government. And governments in this part of the world have often tried to wish industries into existence. And sometimes they were successful, to be fair, right? Like if you look at France and the aerospace industry and Airbus, the government was behind it. So, what's the role of government? And with Web3, are we reaching a point where governments become irrelevant, or are we actually still in a situations where governments, where ministers, digital ministers, can actually do something about building these hubs, whether in Europe or elsewhere?
Yeah, just before answering that question, I would say it's important to look at the steps the world is taking. And when you look at what happened with Apple and Google, where anybody in any country could create games and send them automatically to Apple to be published. So that changed the world in a big way, because from anywhere you could create games. And we see games coming from all over the planet. And Netflix is doing a little bit the same thing, where there are now creations that are done all over the world. You don't need to go in Hollywood to create a very interesting IP and experience. And I think what this new Web3 world is the continuation to that. So everybody knows now that they can create something, and if they are smart, it will automatically emerge and create value and revenue and a fantastic experience for the people that are going to use it. So this is really changing the mentality, and what we need from government, that then we come to that, is them to actually understand what's going on and train their teams so that they can really see where they can help to push that even further in their country. So they need to be specialists of those new technologies, and quickly, actually, after it starts, because lots of things are happening at the beginning, and we are still at the beginning, but it won't last like this. In 5 years, many spaces will be taken, and it will be difficult to emerge as a big country or as a big force in this industry.
And I completely agree. We need governments to understand the technology deeply, which is, traditionally not their forte. And look, even as they always say, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And it's certainly true in this case, where this has a lot of reminders of 1999, 2000, when the thing to remember that I remember very clearly is that I knew the internet was the future. I had many people telling me I was wrong. And I had a mobile phone in my pocket, and it did absolutely nothing with respect to the internet yet. And that was 8 years away from kind of being, the mobile phone was 8 years away from being, even the beginning of an internet platform. So you have to be able to not only understand what's going on, but predict the future in a little bit. And if we were doing a news broadcast on television right now, the news anchors have a much easier job than the weather forecaster, right? Telling what already happened is much easier than telling what's going to happen tomorrow. And so governments are in this position with a technology which is truly revolutionary, right? I mean, I think that we knew the internet was going to change humanity, or some of us did back in 2000. But also, I think very few of us would have predicted, Brexit or Donald Trump as president, right? And so the internet did change humanity in really important ways. So if a revolution of information changes humanity like that, let's imagine what a revolution of value is going to do for humanity. So I think, very difficult and very difficult to kind of be in the position of government when, again, we're moving sort of, the role of nation state is changing. We are moving on, as human beings in the way that we live, we're moving somewhat from nation state to network state, because 8 hours a day is spent in a networked environment. We actually live and spend our attention in networked environments. So very challenging, I think, to be a government in that context.
So speaking about exciting concrete applications of Web3, right? I mean, I think we're still kind of a little bit where we were with this internet in late 90s, where the visionaries, the pioneers, you guys, you see the future, this is big, this is going to change the world, but there are still some people kind of asking questions, well, give me something concrete, that's really, changing and improving people's lives. So maybe moving that to Europe, Yves, what are some of the projects, companies, or trends in Europe when it comes to Web3 that you're particularly excited about, whether in gaming or elsewhere?
Yeah, there are plenty of good ideas in gaming. What's extremely important is really to make sure it will bring something for players, that will enhance their experience, that will give them a chance to own more of what they do in the games. Players today are spending lots of time and create lots of value in those games. And if we find a way for them to be more successful, more recognized, better recognized, I think we will be able to make them be part of that experience in the creation and in owning what's happening. So when you participate to a party and you created it, you like it a lot more than if you just come to it. And I think the new trend is to own what exists in that game environment. And if we can do that well, safely, it can be extremely successful. And there are quite a few companies doing that at the moment.
Absolutely. This is a revolution of value and ownership. We've all spent a lot of time, whether it's in games or online, and creating, maybe it's creating on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, et cetera, with the value of what we create accruing, to that tech company. And there's this opportunity, for ownership within that. I mean, I think it's much broader than that. Again, we live digital lives, so therefore we will have digital things. It's ironic that, the technology I used to get into parties at NFT NYC was better than the technology that I used to get into the United States of America. Like these kind of gaps get closed. The fact that I'm using a credit system called Visa to basically do a cash transaction at the local bodega, that's when there are players in the value chain that aren't adding value, they go away over time. We have international cash settlement that will happen in different ways in the future. But our luxury products will be digital in the future because we live digital lives, and so our ability to kind of take ownership, transfer ownership. Look, here's something very simple. Ticketmaster in the US has quietly distributed 4 million NFTs since May, right? And they are in the form of tickets, they're in the form of digital collectibles. Starbucks basically has a stable coin, right? Starbucks dollars, and they're adding, and they're bringing that onto the network. So a world where I can now take the value that's in my Starbucks wallet or my Carrefour wallet or whatever it is and send it straight out to my ledger is a very different world. And I don't, as Ledger, need a deal with Carrefour to do that. I'm using a public blockchain, which becomes these rails for transfer, and that is just massive. To have that built on top of this internet and 6.5 billion connected smartphones is gigantic.
And actually, speaking of effectively fintech, right? I mean, fintech is actually one area where Europe has done really well. If you look at some of the leading global fintech companies, they came from Europe. Coming from Ledger, so where do you see some of the most promising projects, or maybe even you've been also implementing some of these technologies into your games, and maybe then a follow-up question for you is, what is the user experience? Because I think maybe, do they really see it as owning things, or is there pushback from some of them as just kind of seeing as the old centralized guard is just using the technology to take advantage of us? So sorry, two different questions for the two of you.
I think in terms of user experience, which you asked about, and we're really focused on security and ease of use. Those are our two things, and we do security without ever compromising. We are trying to get to ease of use without ever compromising security or self-custody, and that's the trick. And we're in this early day. Back in 1995, I put the first URL on a movie poster, but you weren't saying go to my website in those days. In those days, you were saying get a personal computer, get a modem, get an ISP. Get a web browser, okay, now come to my website, right? And we all know the experience of onboarding people into crypto right now, and it's quite similar, right? Get a wallet, get a hardware wallet, get some value from an exchange. We know that there's a long path there, but that gets cleaned up over time. In 2000, I did the first day and date release of a digital and physical album, right? And we sold 20 copies. Right? Now if you say hey Siri, play some Slayer. Hopefully your phones are all going to play Slayer right now. But that's where we are and where we've come in a very short period of time. So user experience-wise, we're just early. We're all building. This stuff catches up. There's kind of an inevitability to this. So really getting people to take advantage of all of the things that they can do with digital value from Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, NFTs, and all of the utility then of those, whether it's the Ticketmaster or Starbucks examples I mentioned earlier, and on and on and on and on, and doing that with security and self-custody is what we're focused on building.
User experience. And
yes, exactly. There's still a lot of work to do, and what I hear very much is that people say, okay, decentralize, it's okay. It's just we need to get something out of it. And if in decentralizing, we lose a lot of the things we have when those things are centralized, it doesn't work. So we really, and you all have to work hard to make sure it is safe, it is interesting, that it brings a lot more to players and to the different people using those elements. So we know in a new technology, it's always tough. It needs time, as you said earlier. But what I see is that the energy we have in this industry is just phenomenal. There's lots of money and talent, and I think we will be able to create a new world that will be closer to each individual.
Speaking of new worlds, metaverse, I mean, gaming, that's kind of the obvious precursor in a way to the metaverse. So how do you see the evolution of metaverse? And also, I think, given the big strength of Europe in creative industries, Ian, how do you see maybe Europe there? And again, what are the kind of exciting projects or opportunities that, well, you would raise or emphasize in Europe?
Yeah, we in the video game industry, we have the tools. We have the capacity to create worlds. We can connect them one with the other. Now we have to make sure we can make sure that everything we create can work for everyone. So we will have all together to put norms and things that will make sure that when we create something, it can work with all the other things that are all the other metaverses that are created, so that there's a good communication between all those worlds. So I would say we have the tools, but we need first to understand what kind of applications people want to have. So we spoke with Jan about the luxury goods. They want to show their project. They want to make sure there's a digital experience for the physical products they create. We just have to make sure those experiences are very interesting and that they are giving people actually a way to experience something different and better than when they only have a physical product.
And I think that, I mean, the term metaverse is a bit of a red herring at this point. I think you've been building, metaverses or microverses for 40 years now, right? And we all live in a metaverse, right? The definition of metaverse by the company formerly known as Facebook, now called Meta, is people who are not in the same physical space collaborating. And I don't know about what you do for a living, but that's my job. I sit in front of a computer and collaborate with people who are not in the same room with me. And guess what? It's not three-dimensional, or I'm in a three-dimensional space and they're in a three-dimensional space, but I'm looking at a two-dimensional video. And that's fine. The notion that metaverse is three-dimensional is total bullshit, right? Being in a metaverse means you're spending time with people you're not in the same room with. And to your point about tools, we have these tools. They might not be an immersive 3D world, but WhatsApp is one of those tools. Discord is one of those tools. Zoom, Google Meet, these are all metaverse tools that help us collaborate with people that we're not in the same physical space with. Now combine that with something like Elon's Starlink, and I can now be on a remote mountaintop and be collaborating with someone just as easily as if I was sitting in Silicon Valley or New York or Tokyo or Paris or London, and you change humanity. And that is where we are. Humans are a collaborative force. It's why we've gotten to the place on the food chain that we are. And now we can collaborate without even being next to each other. And I think that's that's kind of the true meaning of metaverse. And whether or not we have 3D rabbit heads is irrelevant.
And I think it's what we spoke a bit before coming, and you were saying here we speak, it's 100% accuracy in the understanding of one each other. And as we go more and more online, the goal of those places, the metaverse, all those elements are to actually give us an experience that is close to the 100% we have today. So to create all the tools, all the capacities for people to express themselves within those worlds, so that we have a good communication, and we can first do that from anywhere we are, but also learn from each other and discover new things together that are not automatically physical. So those possibilities are immense, and I think there's lots of things that can be done to make us better people and have a better life.
I think that communication has always been the killer app of the internet, right? Since pre-web. And there are basically two timelines of the internet. There's the content timeline, and then there's the communication timeline. And in some ways, metaverse is those two things smashing together. Culture and technology are smashing together.
Well, unfortunately, we're coming towards the end of this panel, but one of the things that you mentioned when we were discussing before was that it's great to have Binance in Paris. It sucks that there's going to be a lot of competition for talent. So I think as a pitch to all the talent in this room, again, any final thoughts on, as Izzy already said, this is probably already the tech, well, not tech, but Web3 hub of Europe. Any final pitch to all this talent, not from Paris, not from France? Why come in here, and why be part of this exciting emerging ecosystem?
I think it's what we've seen in the industry is when you have lots of companies coming in a country, they actually train talents, and those talents go everywhere afterward. You know, when we went in Montreal, we were able to create a global ecosystem. In France, we did the same. So we are very happy that you came Binance in Paris. So you are going to train lots of people that are going to do a good job in your company, but are also going to do a great job doing other companies around. And it's the same for Ledger. The fact that we have a good ecosystem is going to help France and Europe to actually go fast in this new industry.
For me personally, I moved here from California 7 years ago, and you know, when I left Apple and came to LVMH, I left California and came to Paris. You know, all the time, you know, people were asking me why did you do that? I think isn't that where you want to be if you're in technology? It does feel different today than it did then, and you know, I'm very happy that I made that jump, and just even for the perspective that it gave me. You know, just to have the perspective on, you know, where we were and what we were doing in California versus, you know, what's going on here, and how do you bring those two worlds together? I think the great thing is that these worlds need each other. You know, I mean, Europe needs a little bit of what California has. California needs a lot of what Europe has. Whether it's from an education perspective, the best school is probably in the middle of the Atlantic, someone once said to me, which just doesn't actually exist. You know, but I think that's what we have to do, and I think I would encourage anyone just to have the life experience, you know, to move around, move from company to company, move from place to place, gain that experience, gain that perspective, and you know, really try to figure out, like, who are you? Where do you want to be? Like, that's the opportunity that we have.
And I can only agree with that. And as someone who actually just recently moved to Paris from London, so not from having lived in California before, I think Paris has definitely changed. It's changing. It was always great, but now it's even better. It's becoming very international. And I think, again, with the advent of companies like the new ones, like Ledger, and old ones like Ubisoft, but old ones that manage to stay youthful, and Binance, let's hope it will be becoming increasingly more exciting place to be in the coming years. So, Yves, Ian, thank you so much for being here, and yeah, hope to work with you very closely on building this exciting ecosystem here.
Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank
Et
you.
bienvenue Binance.